Powerhouse Hobbs, Konosuke Takeshita, Kyle Fletcher, and Brian Cage against Jericho, Omega, Kota Ibushi, and Paul White. Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, street fight. So we had Jericho and Paul White, who are not the Golden Jets. They were in their suits, which I guess was a tie-in for this game of some sort. But Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi did not participate in this uniform.
Unless they have guys that look like them in the game.
You know who I was thinking about who should have been the fourth man on this team instead of Paul White in a suit?
Loki.
Seems like we got like a Dragon Gaiden street fight.
Oh, he'd be perfect in this.
Oh my God, he was made for this. I mean, I couldn't help but think of Loki during this. So they all are out. Paul White made it to the ring. He walked out, and then
not really. He pretty much stayed up on the ramp and just let everybody come to him. You know,
did he not walk down to the ring?
He did not go to the ring. No.
That's right. He did stay up there. He did. You know what I'm mistaking it with? The walk was the slow motion walk towards the arena that we got earlier.
Yes,
that was I saw him walk at some point, and it was like the frame rate was definitely slowed down.
He walked in slow motion. Yes.
Excalibur does mention that Jericho drew first blood beating Takeshita at Ultimate Party. So we did get a mention of the match. Mm-hmm. This certainly did not play in terms of like the mutual respect and handshake at the end. And now they're murdering each other in the concession area and using every weapon on one another. So it felt like that part was not part of the story.
Because nobody knows about it.
No, I mean, like you do kind of look at it as like, I guess this was,
I think it was more so done for the TDT audience. I mean, I can imagine Jericho coming in as sort of like the big superstar and Takeshita taking the big superstar to his limit, but leaving with the respect. Like, I felt that was just more for the DDT audience rather than this AEW.
This was like, it was a lot for Jericho to do all this in the span of 5 days?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Callis is on commentary and he just explains that Jericho won because he's been paying off refs in Japan for years, and Don Callis wasn't there to make sure everything was smooth. Some of the highlights: Paul White chokeslammed Kyle Fletcher off the stage. That was his big offensive maneuver of the match. Omega and Ibushi did the cross slash in the ring, which was
this was really awkward. I mean, I wouldn't even put it all so much on Kota Ibushi, which I think maybe. Okay, so
he was definitely the slower of the two here. But
even before the actual dive itself, there was some clear miscommunication of where people were supposed to be, and I'm assuming it was Brian Cage that wasn't in the right position because you had the most awkward, long, drawn out pause as Ibushi was just like, "Am I supposed to really do this now? There's nobody there to catch me, right?" So everything
all
was
the
just
people that might have just no one's there. I'm just going to do it anyway. He might have been the guy to just do it.
To get in a match with the Invisible Man. Suddenly,
I hit him. We cut to Paul White and Hobbs, who are now outside the arena by a car. More to come later. Ibushi then comes down the ramp on a bicycle, an actual bicycle. They had all these props out there.
This was very much a tie into the video game where you can use a bike,
of, different signs, and a bicycle. So he rides down with a pipe, and dude had the biggest grin on his face. He was having the time of his life, and then hit Kyle Fletcher and Konosuke Takeshita with the lightest pipe shots you will ever see. I mean, this was basically him delivering a newspaper to these guys. Cage clotheslines him off the bike. That was the end of the smile. And then Hobbs, we go to the back. He has lifted up Paul White and he drops him onto the hood of this car and he rolls off. That was the end of Paul White. And I do not mean from this match. I mean, no, this is the end of Paul White, and it should be. This poor guy, listen, he has a role in this company. He does not need to be doing this stuff at this point. Like, this guy has had like hip replacements all for this spot. I'd be like, no way. This is just, he had no business being in this. I understand he's like the big monster. There was no need for this.
So I think the only reason why you would justify having Paul White in a match like this is so that you could have Powerhouse Hobbs do the Hogan Andre spot, right? Problem with this was that it was in the back and I don't think it elicited. It wasn't built up. It took place pretty early in the match itself, and it was in the back. So I don't think you had that immediate like big audience reaction to something like this. If they instead teased it throughout the match and then finally delivered it like a traditional like Hogan Andre spot, I think that in it itself would have been enough to leave a lasting memory. He didn't need to go through a car, he didn't have to like do all this shit. But I guess in a street fight they wanted him to be out relatively early. Ultimately, I do question like Paul White's inclusion in something like this, and I don't think it was really that effective by the end.
I think you could have gotten away with like just 3-on-3 with no Brian Cage, or just you find somebody else. It was like, dude, this is probably not going to be like the most remembered spot in this match, but I promise you, Paul White, just seeing him go around, I'm sure this is just going to be a killer to wake up after that. This was not like some just seamless fall that was all protected and stuff. I was like, this looked like it sucked. And then rolled off of it to the concrete floor. Man. So that was the end of Paul White in the match. And I don't know where Hobbs went for like 15 minutes, but then he showed up back in the ring.
It was really strange. He was like he was there barking at White, and being held back. And I mean, I guess why,
Maybe he yelled at him for like another 10 minutes before he realized the match was still going on. Konosuke Takeshita uses the actual physical bicycle to attack Omega, Jericho, and Ibushi, including delivering a brainbuster to Ibushi onto the bicycle. Jericho and Konosuke Takeshita make their way to the concession area. This is what Paul White should have been wearing, those yellow neon pants.
Oh, maybe. Sure.
This looks like this looks like Young and Dundas.
Probably not, but
no, probably not. Then there's a suplex onto a plastic pallet by that Kenny takes. So Kenny gets a beer bottle and he smashes it over Kyle Fletcher's head. Fletcher's bleeding. They explain that Omega's hand is bleeding. I pray that this was not the case, that they used a beer bottle.
Oh, I can't imagine. I think it broke, didn't it? Didn't it
definitely
shatter?
Broke, and it didn't have like the crazy explosion like the gimmicked ones do, but I couldn't see up close on his hand, but the announcers kept saying how he cut open his hand on the beer bottle, and Fletcher was like all busted open from this. But nonetheless, they continued. There were more broken bottles to come. Takeshita came off a drink machine in the concession area. We see a golden trigger to Brian Cage get stopped when Hobbs makes his miraculous return and hits the world's strongest slam onto Kenny Omega. Cage does a superplex to Omega from the apron through 2 tables on the floor. This was nuts. Spinebusters delivered by Hobbs onto Ibushi. Go through another picture-in-picture. Kyle Fletcher takes Kota Ibushi, and we've got all these chairs set up on the floor with a sign over top, and he comes off the edge of the apron with a tombstone down onto these chairs. Judas Effect hits Hobbs, but he stays on his feet, so Omega and Jericho duct tape Hobbs and shut his mouth with the duct tape, attack him with weapons, including another bottle. Omega stops the drill claw. We see a bat shot from Jericho, Poison Rana, V-Trigger, and then the one-winged angel onto Brian Cage as Omega gets the pinfall, and they prevail. And Don Callis says that Brian Cage screwed the family tonight.
Always putting the out on the person who's actually not in the stable, which is
and
very funny.
The three survivors celebrated because Paul White was done. We may never see Paul White wrestle again.
Oh man, yeah. I thought this match was a lot of fun. Much like the Anarchy in the Arena or Stadium Stampede, I thought they created the element of spectacle in this one. Had a lot of creative spots, a lot of risk taken, a lot of risk
a lot of risk taken.
Might have not even be
a match that everyone was probably hurting from. Like they did a lot of stuff in this.
It was definitely a concerning amount for some people. But that's sort of the expectation now, John, for any of these types of matches. You need to deliver things that are memorable, certainly first and foremost, and to a certain level of risk. So they managed to do that. I thought it was engaging, entertaining, and memorable, which is about as much as you can ask of promotional tie-in type of match.
How did Kota Ibushi look to you in this match?
At this point, my expectations are pretty tempered, with modern day Kota Ibushi, and I thought he looked fine. And I mean, let's keep in mind the man's still doing moonsaults. He's still doing things like that. He's not the sort of like best in the world type of performer that I think we all, at one point thought of him as, but he's still good enough for this sort of role, I think. And by the way, Tony Khan announced that Kota Ibushi is officially all elite after this match.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, Kota did kind of like said that he had like signed a deal around like blood and guts, and that they made a lot of concessions to his schedule and wanting to live in Japan. Yeah, I think Kota Ibushi, I think he left New Japan at the right time. But he's going to a company where it's not like quite frankly, if the door was open, this may have, like, if you're looking for one big final run in a major company, this might have been the time to go to a WWE if they had interest, where you can get away with a lot less. With AEW, like, he is going to need to be in big matches, and I don't think you can always camouflage him in a setting like this. And like, certainly this is not the Kota Ibushi of 3 years ago. I mean, but
WWE, I don't know how they would have pushed him as a character. You know what I mean? The language barrier is always going to be a big thing, and they're just figuring out with Shinsuke Nakamura, and I don't know if they would have seen the same type of like storytelling.
It's a huge gamble, but I think it would have been a easier expectation level as well, that he could get away with doing a lot of shortcuts.
But in AEW, he's already a name that I would say more of the AEW audience probably knows, and he does have the attachments to Kenny Omega that you can use to tell stories. And at this point, I don't even expect him to be much more than a special attraction, like to occasionally attach to a Kenny Omega.
It's
like
what he should be
doing.
It's like he should not, and he won't be a regular weekly character. And it's probably best that you isolate a handful of matches a year that you can move him into. And that concluded it, like a wild street fight that certainly delivered on the violence quotient. And I'm sure the video game creators love this.
Yeah, this was, I mean, the last time they did this was for what is it? Halloween, the thing with Jarrett and Jeff Hardy, remember that?
Oh,
it was all right. Red.
Yes, this went over better than that.
This was much better than that. So, or was that Texas Chainsaw Massacre or whatever?
It was, yeah.
I thought Brian Cage was really entertaining in this match too. Like he kind of is, like, he really
just had a child this week.
What a way to celebrate. Let's go up next to Corey from Long Island, who says, I don't watch Dynamite Live these days. I just found that most of the time for me, weekly wrestling programming just isn't appointment viewing anymore. Today was a different story. A couple months back, I suffered a bad case of hip tendonitis and had to rehab it for about 3 months. In the time where one of my biggest hobbies, running, was taken away from me, I decided to go back to my trusty standby of video games in between rehabbing. Long story short, 4 months and over 200 hours of Yakuza games later, I find myself able to beat the final boss of the latest Yakuza / Like a Dragon game, The Man Who Erased His Name, only to get a text from my friend that the Like a Dragon, The Man Who Erased His Name street fight was about to begin. I promptly paused the game. This match was sick. Takeshita and Cage coming out dressed up like Majima from Like a Dragon and Axel from Streets of Rage. The Streets of Kamurocho on display on the Videotron. Acts of violence being performed with the bicycle. All of this was tailor-made for me to cackle loudly. There were so many stupid and gnarly bumps in this match, and I couldn't keep my eyes off of it for a second. Paul White and Kota Ibushi are really in their incredibly washed old guy wrestler era, and you know what? That's sick.
I understand the point he's making. I'm not going to put Paul White and Kota Ibushi in the same category together.
Yeah, I suppose maybe compared to their peaks of their careers, maybe there's something there. But he says, was this match a Matt classic? No. Would I tell most sane human beings to go out of their way to watch it? No. Was this match good? Maybe. Will it get me to go out of my way to buy this game? I just beat it and the credits were rolling as I typed this. But you know what? This match was sick, and that's what really matters. Eagerly awaiting the Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth street fight.
All right. Well, brought a disenfranchised Corey back to AEW.
So I'm recognizing that the fans of the game already really, really, really like this match. So as a shout out to people who are already fans of the franchise, I mean, I feel confident enough to say that it was a success. Did it inspire people who don't normally play video games to buy a console? Maybe that's not even the intent. Did it inspire lapsed fans or people who own, I don't know, a PlayStation or an Xbox to talk about this game or to look into this game.
I would totally play
know.
this game if I had the means to. 100%.
Swing bicycles at some people, sure.
Drop large men on hoods of cars, whatever it was. Listen, you're right. You're talking about probably the most discerning audience, which would be fans of the game. And if it paid service to them, I think that would probably be your hardest audience to please. So that would be a pretty good sign right there. Jordan from the Bronx, also on baby duty during Dynamite, and perhaps my views on things might be altered due to my lack of sleep. I'm finding that the recent stretch of AEW shows have lost some of their luster. I'm still entertained, but nothing feels must-see. I can say that going into the pay-per-view, I'm interested in Swerve and Hangman and the development of the Devil Mask storyline, which he predicts will be Adam Cole. The street fight was a fun, chaotic mess, but I couldn't understand the point of Paul White's involvement in the feud if he was only going to be taken out in the back within the first third of the match. He didn't factor into the win in any way, and the bump seemed more dangerous than it was worth. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a spot for Powerhouse Hobbs to look like a monster. But I agree. Like I just thought that Paul White was like, man, did this man need to be put through this? Like he should just not be wrestling at this point. Like he has been through just the ringer with his body and the amount of surgeries he's had. And I mean, we could see that when he was unveiled as the partner, like you could just see how limited his mobility was there. And this was probably the best they could do to masquerade that in the sense where we get a choke slam spot off the stage and then he's taken out in what would look to be a pretty...
Okay, so let me ask a question. And I don't want to sound insensitive when I'm talking about people's like livelihoods, but if you're Tony Khan, would you renew his contract?
I think that with a Paul White, if you like, we have to look at like a value of being able to do all of this local media. Like if you want to keep a guy, like that would be my role for a Paul White.
Is that his value?
I think it is. I think it is with working with a lot of these charities and doing a lot of community stuff that AEW is trying to do in different markets. Yes, I think he's excellent in that role. But that would be the role that I would be continuing him with. I would not, watching this, just seeing how the man is getting around, I would not feel comfortable putting him in a match, nor is there room on this show for him. Like there is, like, it's not as though it's like, oh, I wish we could just get, a couple more matches out of Paul White because there's all this stuff that we could do. Like this, we have a stacked roster. We have a solid stacked roster, and we need to be getting younger, not older. There can be a role for a Paul White. It's not wrestling. Let's go on to Alfredo. The Like a Dragon street fight had some of my friends who are fans of the game interested in watching Dynamite this week, and they had a blast. I had no idea how the fight looked to non-Yakuza fans, but it brought us great joy to see Takeshita don an eye patch and snakeskin jacket while throwing bicycles at people. I hope Sega got their money's worth.
What video game would you like to see them promote next?
Mario Kart.
Maybe they could do it in Vegas.
GoldenEye.
Something there.
How about that?
That might be a bit tricky, unless it's only chops.
The chops, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Mark, who says, so short list, but the question needs to be asked. Was tonight's sponsored street fight the best sponsored gimmick match we've seen across AEW and WWE? I'm leaning towards yes. Better than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre match, yes. Pitch Black Mountain Dew match, and the Army of the Dead Lumberjack match. What am I missing?
Yeah, well, these all sound like the worst.
Has AEW
AEW has done a few of these. Like, remember when that Space Jam movie came out? And it's like, it wasn't so much... Like, to me, it was not offensive when I was watching it. And I think that's what you look at this. Like, are you hitting me over the head and I'm watching an ad and you just feel like I am the gullible fan that will just digest all of this marketing? I think you just want to make it as though we've put clear thought into this to give you some fan service while we're also satisfying an advertiser. And I think they hit a home run with this one tonight. I think overall, like I would say, yeah, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was not the greatest hit, but it also was not the Army of the Dead Lumberjack match or searching for a golden egg all night long. I think AEW has had a better integration of these overall, but this might be the high point. I don't know. I don't have these off the top of my head of sponsored matches.
I think there was a lot more heart and sort of knowledge of the source material put into a match like this than, a Mountain Dew Pitch Black match, which, I mean, how do you really promote Mountain Dew in the body of a match? But certainly the zombie movie was just, they just heard zombies, and then they just gave you the most generic sort of interpretation of what I don't know, zombies would be in a professional wrestling setting. Again, probably a lot more challenging to promote than a match like this. But this was clearly made from people who at least had pretty good knowledge about the video game for certain spots, like the bicycle and I guess the dressing up part. So and the hardcore fans are going to respect that a lot more.